Hello everyone and welcome to a new season of The Hidden Lives of Writers. My name's Fiona Snyckers and I'm joined by my co-host Gail Schimmel.
Fiona, it's the beginning of season 7. Have I got it right? Can this really be the case that we've done a whole 6 seasons and we're willing to do it again?
And we have such a great guest today. I'm so excited.
It's starting the season with a bang, and I'm also very, very, very excited to be back in the studio. Very excited about our guest today. It's going to be great.
Tell us about your writing week, Gail. How's it going?
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a darker subject. I have finished, it's been a while since we've chatted. Mm-hmm. And I finished the thriller I was working on. And I've decided that I'm going to try and do the whole submit to international agents path of trying to get published. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing it. And first of all, it is very time consuming. It's really for each agent you submit to, you've got to read up about them. You've got to check that they're looking for thrillers. You've got to look at what they want. Do they want 25 pages in the email or 3 chapters attached to the email or a form filled in with half the book attached to the form, or, everyone's a different process. So you can't kind of get into a zone and just do 10 of them in one morning. So it's exhausting. And then you start getting rejected. And it really, it's opening yourself up to a huge thing of rejection and questioning, like, actually, maybe this book's absolute crap and this should not be the one that I am trying this with. And I keep having to remind myself, well, it doesn't matter. Maybe this book is absolute crap and it will go nowhere. But they're not going to remember. They're not going to go, oh, there's the one who sent us that absolute crap. We won't look at anything else she wrote. And I also have had, I think it's Alistair Mackay's words. I think he was the one who said to us, if you're not being rejected, you're not putting yourself out there.
Yes.
And that really has become a mantra for me. The rejections are a sign of success because you're putting yourself out there. But that's been my week. What about you?
I am really having to recalibrate my brain and focus on the new year following a very busy festive season where all my best intentions of keeping my writing going fell by the wayside. It was just too much. I need a break from the break that I've just had, but a break is not forthcoming. I've got to get back to it, and I'm just trying to fall back into old routines that I knew worked in the past, and I know they'll work again. And it's just a matter of forcing myself to sit down, shut out other distractions, and focus on that screen in front of me. I know it'll come, but I'm in that very sort of frazzled stage of doubting myself, doubting what I've written, and wondering if I'm going to be able to get back into the groove again.
It's very hard getting that groove back and getting that discipline back. It's like I suppose any good habit, hard won and easily lost.
Yes, exactly.
And are you managing to read or watch or enjoy anything between this busy festive season and trying to write?
Possibly too much. That's another distraction that I'm going to have to cut out a bit. But yes, at the moment I am reading Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell because I realized the movie, yes, it is a movie, is coming out soon. I want to watch it, but I do have a rule for myself that I won't watch a series or watch a movie if it's based on a book and I haven't read the book. I've got to read the book first, always. Just honor the creative process, read the book, and then watch whatever it might be. And I thought that I couldn't read Hamnet because it's about the death of a child and the grieving process. And I thought, oh no, I'm not up to this. But then I read Elif Shafak's There Are Rivers in the Sky, which traumatized me so deeply that I thought, oh no, it's fine. I can read Hamnet. If I could handle this book, I can handle Hamnet. And indeed, I can handle Hamnet. But it's not at all what I expected. I thought the death of the child would come at the beginning of the book and it would be about the grieving process. It's not. There are 2 timelines, where Hamlet's parents, Shakespeare and his wife, although he's never named, meet and fall in love and get married and start building their family. And then another timeline where the plague comes into their home and starts infecting their children. And those two timelines run parallel. I'm quite near the end and everybody's still alive. That's not going to last forever. I know that. But I'm enjoying it very much. I love Maggie O'Farrell. And there is a bit of a but. And the but is she has imagined Mrs. Shakespeare as a kind of witch woman. And I'm all for witches and cozy
we love a witch.
Witches. We love a witch, but I'm not sure about this witch. She has, yes, she's a healer. She grows herbs and plucks them and has a connection to the forest and what have you. And yes, women were healers in that way. But this thing of, she can see the future. She knows the gender of her child before it's born. She can touch somebody and sort of receive information about them, these kind of psychic powers. I'm not totally buying into it. It is striking me as slightly silly.
Okay.
And I slip in and out of, okay, it's fine. I'll suspend disbelief for now and I'm actually enjoying it. And then thinking, oh, come on, come off it. This is just a bit silly.
And I suppose harder to swallow because it is supposed to be based on a real woman.
Yes, it is. And I do get the whole biofiction thing. It's a creative reimagining, and she's really taken an awful lot of license over this. And I just can't quite stay in the story and suspend my disbelief long enough. And it might be a me thing and not a her thing.
I really struggled. I tried to read it. I read the beginning, and for me, that a child was going to die just hung over my head like a sword, like waiting to fall. And you're telling me now it would have hung over my head for most of the book. You haven't persuaded me to read it, Fiona. Maybe we'll chat though when you actually are finished.
Yeah, we can revisit. What about you, Gail? What have you been reading or watching?
So I have had a lovely, lovely, fun television time with, and I'm not really sure how you say it, Pluribus.
Yes.
And I love everything about it except the name. I think the name should have been something slightly more accessible, but it is for anyone who has still got the joy of watching it ahead of them. It is, and I'm not even sure how much you can say without it being a spoiler, but it's set in a near future world, where suddenly everyone is struck down with a virus-like event, which joins the whole of humanity as one consciousness, except for 12 people. Is it 12 people?
Yes, I think it's 12, including our heroine.
And it goes from there. And it is just fun and clever and makes me think. And I loved it so much that when I finished binge watching that series, I was bereft, but there is going to be another series. And you were telling me before we started recording that there is a particular promise.
Yes, apparently Stephen King tweeted the makers of the show and said, look, I'm not getting any younger. I'm an old man now. You have to bring out the next season and do it soon because I do not want to die before watching the next season of this. And they were like, okay, Stephen King, we're on it.
The other very interesting thing that unfortunately I didn't hear before I watched, so I couldn't watch for it, but someone told me about is apparently they only use 3 colors in any one scene.
Oh, really?
You're very fixated, it's very capturing. You're very in the world. Yes. And there's a whole thing about how there are 3 main colors in any one scene, but you don't notice it. You don't go, this is very monochromatic, but it must be happening on another level. And I almost want to rewatch to look for the 3 colors.
Yes. Oh, I loved it so much. I think it was probably my favorite series of the last year or so. It was absolutely magnificent. Speaking of magnificent, we are absolutely delighted to welcome our guest today. Our guest today is Sally Andrew. Sally is very well known as the author of the Tannie Maria mysteries, including Recipes for Love and Murder, The Satanic Mechanic, Death on the Limpopo, and the Milk Tart Murders, and now most recently in 2026, Her latest Tannie Maria mystery, Wild Things Never Die. She's also the author of Recipes to Live For, a Tannie Maria cookbook, which we also want to hear lots about. Sally, we are so excited that there's a new Tannie Maria book out and also that you are joining us today. Hello and welcome.
Hello, thanks so much. I'm so happy to be with you, Gail and Fiona. Just wish we were in a cafe drinking coffee and eating cake.
That would be so lovely. Thanks for putting that image in our head. Now I'm going to want cake for the rest of the day. I think it's safe to say that this is a wish list interview for us. So we are very, very excited, but we are going to, as always, leap in and ask you, how has your writing week been?
It's unusual because it's less writing and more proofreading. So by the time you get this, my book will be out. But at this stage, I'm still doing the final proofreading, which is a very different stage. It's an interesting mixture of looking for problems and showering the page with love. Because I feel that's something to do before your book goes out, is to just give love to every page and enjoy your own book. But at the same time, slow like a little heron watching for fish, just finding this error, that error, etc.
And when you are in the thick of writing a new book, what does your daily process look like? Can you walk us through that?
Well, it's a little bit similar. I try to every day, especially recently, I try to start with some good exercise. This morning I had a really fun one. So I alternate usually a workout day and a run day. But today I had this wonderful swim day. So I try to do something fun, usually in nature or with my body every day. I was very ill some years ago, and exercise for me is just this great delight and opportunity rather than a discipline. And then I usually try and get a nice stretch of time in the morning. So in the Karoo, I'll usually be sitting in got a beautiful writing room with a view of the mountain and the trees and birds chirping, and there's frogs singing, and a little mongoose comes into the room sometimes. So I'll try and have little breaks just to look around and be where I am. And put in a good few hours. And then I usually do a bit of admin. And then I do something called biofield tuning, which is working with tuning forks in the electric field. That's another big part of how I've got myself better over the years. So that's sort of an ideal day. But it does get thrown by not sleeping well, which can come from a range of things, but usually an overactive mind and worrying about other people.
You write in the morning. What does a successful writing morning look like to you? Do you have a word count you aim at? How do you do that?
Yeah. So for me, a successful, if one does judge that, which I do, is 1,000 words. And sometimes it's finishing a chapter. I write quite short chapters. So it's really nice if I can finish a whole chapter. But I also find it sometimes nice, but this is something I've only learned a bit recently. Mainly I love to finish a draft of a chapter, which is between 1,000 and 1,800 words. And then I'm very happy with that. And I also I reread a little bit of what happened before to get me on track. I'm quite a plotter. So but we can come more to that. But usually so I've got to just check in a little bit with my plot, what has happened, what is happening in this chapter, so that there's a little bit of setup time before I can write the effective words. So that I'm very happy with that. Although I'm kind of aware it's quite slow, and my books are generally quite slow, but that's how it is.
And do you plot chapter by chapter, or have you plotted the whole book out in advance? We love hearing how plotters do things.
We really love this.
Oh, you're not plotters. Neither of you plotters.
Yeah, we've done both. We've done both, yeah.
So I have done a bit of both, but I prefer the plotting because for me, the plotting is to do with the structure. But the actual magic of what happens is a complete mystery to me every day. And so when people who say, no, it's boring to plot, for me, I can let go of the structure and just fall into the pleasure of the magic of what happens and how that happens. So there's a synopsis, and then I do what I call things that happen. And I have a sentence for things that happen, and I write the whole book like that. And then as I go along, I kind of have 2 or 3 chapters planned at a time. Like, okay, this things that happen ends up going over 3 chapters, or these 2 things that happen fit into 1 chapter. So there's so like Tannie Maria goes to work and reads a letter, goes home and makes marmalade. So that might be the things that happen in a chapter. But what exactly happens and does vary. So I don't always plan that when she pops in at Henk, I don't really plan that they have sex on his desk. That just happens because of the way I described the first way they might eye contact. So I am often enough, there'll be new things that happen, but they're within I've got to join the dots, but in between there's unexpected dots that make different shapes. And sometimes, like, I get complete surprises. Like, sometimes I realize halfway through, oh my gosh, she had a child with him. Like, I've had these 2 characters all along, and she's got a baby, but I've never thought who the father was. Sometimes halfway through, I start with themes in my life that I also share with Tannie Maria. So I spend a little bit of time what's going on with her and what's going on with me and where have we got overlaps. Because I spend so much time in my book, I want to be sorting out my own stuff. So, for example, I was struggling with jealousy, so I made her struggle with jealousy. Or sometimes she's got a bit of an issue and then I say, yes, this does overlap. So I have the section called themes of what I want to explore. And then, so that starts first. And then I write a synopsis, which I usually do out in the wilds under a giant tree. I go deep into the wild, no cell phone reception. Usually it takes a few weeks or whatever to get there, usually around the hot season before the rains. And my partner, who's a wilderness artist and has a Land Rover. So all of my books have been plotted under a big tree in a wild place. And it usually takes a morning. And then I have a brief synopsis. And then I do and then what I also do usually on that same morning is I write the first paragraph that gives me the voice of the character and the tone. So that was where Tannie Maria, her first book was on a Camille Doringboom deep in Namibia in Brandberg. And then I just heard her voice. Isn't life funny? You know how one thing leads to another in ways you just don't expect. So there's this combination of this high plotting and this kind of channeling that I start with. And then I usually send my synopsis to my agent, Isabel Dixon, and sometimes she says, no, that's rubbish. And usually she's right. And I kind of I'm not too attached. Like, I've got a few plots that I've ditched. And sometimes she'll suggest this or that, or throw in this or that. And I can do that. I can take the ideas, because for me, that initial planning, it's the magic of how something is written. Everyone's got ideas. To me, they're kind of to a penny. And it's not for me you do need good ideas for a book, but they're not what makes a book good. You can have great ideas and the book doesn't work. And you've got to put in all those hours to make it work. So I'm very open to ideas, and I get good ones from Isabel. They're not to a penny. And then I do so after my first thing, I do a longer synopsis and then send it to her and see what she thinks. And sometimes I've even got the first chapter that I'll send as well. And then, as I say, then I go catch up in my previous story. I go to the things that happen and I start with them. And then usually I've got a treatment going. So my treatment is a 1-line summary of that chapter. So it's a bit more broken down than things that happen. And then I write a 1-line summary of the chapters that I'm writing as I go along. So that's also a way for me to quickly skim the story to get back into it. So I don't have to reread the whole thing. And then I sometimes write pretend treatment lines for the ones. So it's a slightly different version of the things that happen. It's like I've got a treatment for the next 2 chapters as I go along. There was that nice quote about how you don't need to see all the way, but you need to just see the headlights in the road, that section of road. But I have that section of road that I like to have clear. Plus I've got my final destination. And my final destination has also got a few parallel things which aren't all mentioned in the things that happen. So the things that happen are just to do with plot. Whereas I've then got usually psychological and romance and food and character and spiritual plots that are woven throughout. The main thing is the murder plot story. That's the things that happen. Tannie Maria is an agony aunt who lives in Ladysmith, which is down the road from where I live in the Klein Karoo. I live on a nature reserve in the Klein Karoo, and she lives in Ladysmith. And she writes for the Klein Karoo Gazette, and she's got a recipe column called Tannie Maria's Love Advice and Recipe Column. And people write in with their problems, and she's got lovely, grounded, common sense advice. And she also gives them a recipe that solves their problems. She's obsessed with food. She's a 50-something, rather plump woman with curly, reddish-brown hair. She's a Tannie. And she's got a romance going with Detective Kannemeyer, and at the Karoo Gazette she works with Jessie, who's a young investigative journalist, and they kind of work together on investigations, and Hattie, who's the editor, who's much more prim and proper and doesn't like all the crazy, dangerous things they do. But they get involved in murder investigations. But it's usually related to Jessie's journalism or Maria's column, or there's different ways in which they get drawn into murder investigations. And food is somehow always plays a role in there. They bribe people with food to get them to talk, and they solve murder mysteries. It's amazing. But at the same time, Tannie Maria's answering these letters from people with problems, and often their problems overlap a little bit with hers. So that's a whole chain, and sometimes it's a serial letter writer, so there's a bit of back and forth, and there's a arc of story in the letter writer's life. And then Tannie Maria's also and Jessie, but more Tannie Maria's our main. It's written in the first person from her perspective, a romance that grows with Henk Kannemeyer over the books. And she's working through, she had an abusive relationship before Henk, a man who she married and who later died under interesting circumstances. But we're also working not just through romance, but through her quite deep psychological issues. So in the first book, we're dealing a lot with abuse. In the second book, she's actually part of a PTSD group. In the third book, we're dealing with her relationship with her father and a journey she goes on. And the fourth book, we're dealing a lot with, I think that was jealousy and the possibility of, does she have an eating disorder? We dealt with a theme of eating disorders. In the fifth book, which we'll come to and talk more about, is her fear of the dark after she was buried alive in a previous book, but actually to do with her issue around marrying Henk. So each time she's working through deep stuff, and as I mentioned, that's often where I'll find some overlap, but I'll make hers more interesting and more dramatic. But there is an overlap in the underlying theme. And that's also quite, for me, a very important arc. So in each of the books she's developed. So when I'm plotting the book, I'm also plotting her breakthroughs. And in the latest book, also her chicken, who's got PTSD after it was attacked by a jackal. There's a long arc of the chicken's healing process and its encounter with a dog. And then will Henk sing it a chicken song like he used to sing the lamb song? And those I don't know exactly when they're going to happen, but I've plotted in an arc that this is. And then there's just this magic that does weave, and then the intention, something extra happens on top of that. But there's a lot of thinking through. And then there's you see, in a murder mystery, not only do you need to know who the murderer is in the beginning, but you need to have backstories, suspicious backstories for all of the characters. And basically, nobody's free of suspicion. Sometimes even Tannie Maria. But so that's also got to have its own little story. So I'll sometimes have a separate page where I consider each character and what they're going to be doing that makes them look suspicious. And some of that does grow as I go along, but a lot of that's also planned ahead.
I've got one more process question about this plotting. When you talk about these summaries and the synopsis and the what's going to happen thing, are you writing them down in a notebook by hand, or is this a separate computer document on your computer?
Yes, I make little scribbly notes and then I lose them and then I can't read them, and I have to have it in writing and send it to myself back up. And that I also like it because I can juggle things around and it looks more professional and less messy. But when I travel, I will have a little book and I'll jot ideas. But I kind of need stuff. And even if I write a note on my phone, I'll send it to myself by email. I'm not so good with, but I mean, I think it's a good idea, and I think it accesses, I think free writing by hand is really nice, but I'm just too messy and disorganized for that to work for me.
And now, could you take us back to your origin story as a writer? Did you always want to be a writer? Was it something you always aspired to do from early girlhood? Where did that come from? And then specifically, when did Tannie Maria start talking to you? Where did she come from?
So my background is actually as an activist. I was very active in the 80s and I got extremely ill, and that pushed me more into doing what I enjoyed, which was creative writing, and it pushed me into healing work. So that was more relatively recent. But if we go right back to my beginning, apparently I was reading at the age of 4, and my mother, reading the newspaper, the black and white and red all over, and my mother lied about my age and sent me to school. That's her story. Maybe she just needed a break. So I started school very young, and then the books I really loved were Winnie the Pooh and Mary Poppins. And I remember with Winnie the Pooh, when we did writing exercises, I sort of wrote some Winnie the Pooh stories, which I later sold to A.A. Milne. But I enjoyed that genre. And I do sometimes think when people talk about Tannie Maria, she's got a little bit of Winnie the Pooh, looking forward. She's like cuddly and ready for a little something and filled with wisdom that's not intellectual, that's more emotional, grounded. And then I do remember with Mary Poppins, holding the book in front of my face, and breathing the words in, because they were talking about this laughing. When they laughed, they all floated up to the ceiling. There was some scene about that. And I put my hands and I was breathing in the page, hoping that would help me to float up to the top of the room and be filled with laughter and floating. So I must have valued the written word. Yeah. I thought I could breathe it in. I only really started giving myself permission to write once I got so ill that I thought, let me just do some of what gives me pleasure. I started off as an activist doing adult education work, doing work with domestic workers, doing work around the abuse of women. And then I also did, the first book I published was called Stories for Fire Dogs around climate change. And that was a crossover book. Before that, I had written nonfiction books for adults. And I really enjoyed the creative aspect that I did that as part of an honors course in environmental education. And then I'd done a BA at UCT. And then I sent this to someone who was so encouraging. It somehow, in a roundabout way, got to some international publisher who said, you write really well, but if you ever write a normal book, please send it to us. And because this was it was creative nonfiction and very quirky and very much about my own life. And then I wrote what I thought was a normal book. It was Harmony Reigns, The Smell of Rain. It was about this environmental activist who rode a motorbike and who was actually an environmental guerrilla. She'd blow up ships not with people on them, but when I don't know what she did, whaling ships and then she was close chummies with this sand tracker, and it was a whole story about the diamonds and the sand, and they worked together and beat the bad guys. But I didn't have so that took me a little while. But just writing pure fiction was such fun for me. It's the most fun I've had, other than things that I don't want to share in public. Mm-hmm. And it was just so glorious. I just so loved it. And that crossover to this pure fiction was just a game changer for me. And then I shared that all over, including with this original woman, and she said, no thanks. But I'd been bitten. And I shared that a lot. And it wasn't clearly enough in a genre because there wasn't a death. There was crime, environmental crimes, which I think are much worse than deaths. But I mean, they're serious and people die, but it wasn't a murder. So that didn't go anywhere, but I did practice getting rejected with that. think, between that and then getting more funding when the Fire Dogs book, it was published, and I got free copies to 200 countries, youth in 200 countries. But in order to try and get it further or bigger funding, I think I literally went through at least 100 rejections between those two books. So the practice getting rejected was very important for me in my writer's journey, because I think, and I'd kind of put on a different hat. So like Tuesdays, and I might even literally put on a hat. Tuesdays, I'm sending out my soliciting rejections. And then every time, actually by the time I got to the later book, I was more strategic. And every time I got one rejection, I'd send 2 more applications. So a rejection would exponentially grow. And when I did finally track down Isabel Dixon, she was a Karoo girl. She is based in London. She might well, so it was a little bit more strategic. And I caught her just before she went to Frankfurt Book Fair. And then the Tannie Maria book was like the Cinderella of there was this sudden, very exciting, after these years of, I don't know who's quoted who, but it's been quoted by various people. Margie Orford maybe quoted someone else. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So there had been all this background of practicing rejection, practicing writing, and then suddenly there's the overnight success. And it was a very dramatic, very exciting, like calls at midnight and competing publishers. It was amazing. Like they were all, who are you going to choose between all these different ones? And Isabel was like on the coalface, long hours, and sending to people just before Frankfurt, and then also following on that as well, because it seems like when you get major interest from the American and the UK publishers, that's a big impetus for the international publishers. So the German and in that, I mean, I think I've now got 15 languages, but 14 of them were from those first few weeks or months following on from Frankfurt. So that was a very exciting, very dramatic, and serious money. They offered serious advances. What I also learned from that's quite interesting is they like to gamble on new authors. You kind of think, if you're established author, but I'm having more difficulty now with subsequent books because I'm not they wanted to gamble on the next Girl on the Train or the next McCall Smith, which I wasn't, actually. So, the books did reasonably well overseas, but they did a big gamble on me, which allowed me to work full time on my writing. Mm-hmm. So that kind of investment that they made, which they're getting slowly paid back for, but they didn't get an immediate Girl on the Train. But the great thing about the Tannie Maria books is they do keep ticking over. They're not just a 3-month success. But there is, they had all of that excitement, and they can't get their royalties back from me. They just got to get slowly paid back as the books sell. But it was very exciting for me and very facilitating. But actually, at that point, I was still quite ill with ME. And I just didn't have the energy I'd been slowly writing these books. I was working for my man's art business, helping with sales with that. So now I could shift to doing this full time, but I just didn't have the physical energy. I had ME, myalgic fatigue syndrome. I mean, there was a time I was so sick I couldn't brush my hair, or, a good day I could lie outside for an hour instead of lying inside in a darkened room. It was really bad, and I was a little bit better, but I didn't have enough functioning hours. I couldn't easily travel. My adrenaline shot up. It's still like now with the little tech battles at the beginning, not bad, but I'd get into a little bit of a flap. Still got a little bit of a high adrenaline from that. But it used to be really bad, so it would really wipe me out to have an event. And I just thought, wow, I've got the life of my dreams, but I can't live it. I don't have the physical energy to live it. So, but I thought, no, instead of giving up, I'm going to just get better fast. And I used some of the money from my first advance to go to London and did a course called the Lightning Process, which improved me enough. It's kind of a visualization, neuro-linguistic process, sort of hard to give a summary of without adding on another 15 minutes. But I used it and I did get better. I got slowly better enough to not say no to my agent. And then I discovered this biofuel tuning a few years later, and now I can come first in the park run. So the writing also pushed me to get my act together, get my strength up, to get my joy up. And a lot of it's kind of psychological stuff, but it's not the notion that the illness is psychological. It's the notion that mentally we've got the power to do anything over our bodies.
I think that's something people are very interested in. And when I was researching for this, very surprised to discover that you do not consider yourself a foodie. I had imagined you were a very food-orientated person who sat down and thought, let me write a book that I can bring the food into. Talk to me about that.
Yes, so I sat down and planned the book quite carefully, and then I said, let me have something about the woman that's a bit crazy. And I said, I know, I'll make her obsessed with food. And also, I feel it's quite important that you don't identify too much with your main character. Now, my food background, one of the things I left out is one of the major things that got me better was I did a 17-day water-only fast, and then I ate raw food for 2 years. Just fruit and vegetables. So everything, and even when I started writing Tannie Maria, my diet had played a big role in, although these other two things, the lightning process and biofuel tuning, next leveled my health, my survival was around just eating incredibly pure, no sugar, no wheat, no chocolate. So in the beginning of writing the Tannie Maria, all the things she made were things that I never had, that I could only eat in my books. So they were, but I mean, now I'm a lot better, and I'll eat those things at occasions or for fun, but they're not part of my diet. But I have learned to cook a lot because of this process, but I employ chefs to cook all the processes. I mean, I come up with a lot of interesting recipes because firstly I had a sweet tooth, but I wasn't eating sugar and sweet and dairy for certain periods, so I'd invent things. But secondly, we go camping and I just play with the ingredients and make interesting things. So I've got a creativity related to food, and I have a sense of ceremony. I like to give people food, but I'm totally not a chef or a foodie. And I say that not to distance myself, but because that's a real art and a real skill. Those people who live and think according to food and who can just taste something and say, this needs a little bit of ginger. So I'll always employ those people to help me test and to cook and to help me test. And occasionally I bring in my own recipes that I've come up with because just to make something taste nice.
And you got so into that you also did a recipe book based on the Tannie Maria world, but a recipe book. What was that process like?
Sure. Now, I thought I wouldn't be interested in that, but it was because, as I say, I'm not such a foodie, but all the recipes are in the book. So the end of every book is 15 recipes that related to the stories. And then so for a while, the Penguins were saying, let's make a recipe book. I was, okay. And then they said, what you want to look like? And I said, I don't know. And then I ended up being involved with a whole team who came to the Karoo and just took all these beautiful photographs of where I live in the nature reserve, and also of Ladysmith. And now my brain's gone sideways to the TV series, but that's another discussion. Partly because I had seen some of the visuals there. Chef Maynard had done beautiful things there, so I was aware we'd have these lovely images of food, but the TV series is set in another place in Prince Albert in Eden, whereas the cookbook was more directly related to Ladysmith and where I lived, and the pictures were so beautiful and the food styling was so beautiful. Caro Alberts, she's just amazing, and I'm scared now I'm going to forget names. Ed O'Reilly was doing the photographs, and Helen Hen the layout, and my partner Bowen was helping with it, and anyway, now I'm going to start doing a whole thank you speech. I won't do that now. But there was this incredible team of people who pulled together this beautiful book. It had the recipes and this beautiful photos of food styling, which I didn't know was such an art. And then some of the letters of Tannie Maria, and then some of her favorite wise quotes and the pictures of nature and of Ladysmith. And then this blooming book First, it was nominated for a Gourmand Award, which is an international award, 222 countries. And first it won in its category, which was acknowledgements. It won Best in the World. And then I got another email a few months later that I thought was an error until I reread it or saw a posting on social media. It then won something called Best of the Best, which is amongst, over the last 30 years, they've chosen it in the acknowledgements category. There are lots of categories. It was chosen one of the best in the world. And there's this fictional character, Tannie Maria's recipes, now winning these international awards. It's really like, woohoo.
But amazing.
Unexpected, crazy stuff. But it is a really, really beautiful book. So it wasn't just that one from its category. It was the organizer of the Gourmand Awards sort of sat me down and like, he sat me down. He actually had me nearly in tears. He was very busy and I came to say hi and thanks, and he sat me down and he like said, this is a really nice book, and then he looked me in the eyes and he said, you really know how to write. You've really got to keep going. You've got to keep going. You've really got it. But he could tell like I'm on a path and I need still to keep going, which I do. And I just really heard him. So that was in Portugal. I went with my brother. It was really amazing to go. And to get this little speech from him, which somehow just went right to my head and heart, and I must just keep going. And interesting to me that even like after 5 books and TV series and so many things, I didn't really get that I was a good writer. But this funny little French man, control, with a nice little hat on, and he wouldn't let me get up, and because he said, like, you're not getting it. So I'm taking that on, and I'm going to write better and better.
I love that.
Speaking of carrying on, people who have written a greatly beloved and successful series of books react in 2 different ways. One, they see it as a kind of golden shackles, this thing that they can never get out of, and meanwhile they're longing to do something completely different or write something completely different. Or they love it and want to stay in that world forever and are always happy to return to that world. Where do you fall? How does that hit for you?
Well, I'm not at the stage when it were Agatha Christie said, Poirot is an albatross around my neck. And eventually she killed him, which I haven't read that book. I refuse. But maybe I just haven't by mistake. I've got one of the things I did was I bought the entire collection of Agatha Christie's. Well, it wasn't but it was an entire collection early on when I got money for royalties. I don't feel the burden because I'm always growing myself with the books. I do feel that I want to explore a bit more non-fiction writing and the creative non-fiction that got me going in the first place, because I kind of need to make sense of my own crazy life, and especially my healing path and my tuning work and a lot of losses I've had over the last few years, a lot of deaths, and I'm sort of carving a bit of space to work through that, which may or may not be fantastic bestsellers that sweep the world, or there may be my private, real secret life of writers. But I'm feeling I need to make space for that. But it's not the same as a golden shackle. I'm still really enjoying Tannie Maria, and part of it is I love the Karoo, and I live there, and I love a lot of it is description of nature. And when we talk more about my forthcoming book, it's very based in the beauty and the nature of the area, and I don't think that's ever going to shift. And because I keep her growing, and she does, so like in the latest book, she does things that are sort of biofield tuning exercises where she grounds herself and she's on journeys around connection rather than control. And so I'm always learning alongside her, and she's allowed to change as a character. So I'm not stuck with the little grey cells. She's from the beginning, she's on a psychological and spiritual mission. And I could also, she could go traveling. Apparently with a cozy murder mystery, you can't travel too often. You've got to come back to the same world and the same characters. But if I find that too difficult, rather than stopping, I'll take her to Portugal, or we go on another trip. Although that is more tricky for the TV series, especially. Yeah.
I'm interested in what you just said there, that you said for a cozy. Do you define Tannie Maria as a cozy, or is that a genre that has been put on Tannie Maria? How do you see that whole conversation about genre? Where do you think Tannie Maria falls?
I'd never heard of it before I started writing, so I certainly didn't set out with that intention. But I have come to understand that because it's a feel-good book. But I do feel it's in terms of the usual definitions, but I also think they're challengeable definitions. Like Fiona's books, they're cozy, but you also can have all sorts of deep stuff. So cozy usually stays light, whereas I think how mine are a bit different is I go into deeper political stuff and psychological stuff. But how they're cozy in that I don't go into the gore. I don't like the gore and the blood, and I don't see the purpose or the necessity, and I think it's kind of cheap. It's a cheap way of grabbing attention. So I've accepted that because it's feel good, and because it's a whole genre, which I've now started reading, which I wasn't reading before, and I love it. It's I really enjoy it if it's well written. But there's a lot of not well written. It's a whole genre of, and also of food stuff. So apparently food and romance, I thought I invented the combination of recipes, love and murder, but it's not, apparently very old. And then there's something called culinary mystery. So the first woman who did the catering, she said, "Oh, I love culinary mysteries. I'm so excited to find yours." I didn't know about them. So the answer is no, but I accept it. But I do think it does go broader than that. And some of the first publishers were literary fiction publishers. So, for example, the Italian publishers, they usually publish literary fiction. So there was some acknowledgement of the quality of the writing as being poetic and exploring bigger themes, etc., which is usually literary fiction. But I would love to do it all, but I accept the difference and that I'm not going to win the Man Booker.
One last question about this world that you have created. Have you found that readers almost feel an ownership over the world? Like they want to say to you, "Oh, Henk would never do that," or "Maria would never do that," or "You should do it differently," or "We don't like when you do that," or whatever. And then also having a TV series come out from a different creative team, which kind of reimagined your characters in quite a different way. There were some significant differences. Can you let that all go, or do you feel a bit possessive over it? Because I imagine I would feel a bit possessive over it.
It's been there are two different things. The one is readers don't give me a hard time about what I write, but they sometimes do about the TV series, because it is radically different. I mean, Henk Kannemeyer is an Afrikaans man with a chestnut moustache, but he is now Kaya Meyer, a Zulu man. But they've got similar archetypal energies. They're kind of big, strong, silent. I've really done a lot of letting go training around the TV series. I absolutely couldn't write the script because for me, most of the magic happens inside Tannie Maria's head. So they have to come up with other stuff. They have to come up with multiple perspectives. So I understand it. I think they're amazing. I think they've done a brilliant job. I think there's a lot of similar DNA. I think it shares Tannie Maria's spirit. I'm hopeful as a writer that it gets more people interested in the books, but it's very hard. It's still hard, and I have to let go. And it's not and it's very challenging for me. I'm a bit of a control freak. I used to go to 12-step meetings for codependency, letting go and fixing and controlling. So I'm taking it as a lesson for me, but for people who are not ready to evolve their personalities fast, don't long for it. But it is very unusual. It's very difficult to get. It's an enormous honor. It's now in over 100 countries. This second series has happened, hoping for third series. But it's psychologically very challenging because you're a god in your own world. Even with editors, especially now that I'm a few books in, I don't accept any. Sometimes I just think, shame, they've put so much effort in. They can just change all those commas if they want to, I don't really mind. But I really do have control over my own books, and probably more than other authors. And, the early stages, if someone changed every line, all that read, I just would have thought I have to accept it. But now I just reject, tracking changes. So I really am in control of my books, and I'm really not in control of my film. I was an extra in the last one of the movies. The next one I was going to be, but for practical reasons I couldn't.
So, Sally, tell us, what can readers look forward to with the new Tannie Maria mystery, Wild Things Never Die?
Wild Things. So that's coming out in May, Wild Things Never Die, and Tannie Maria and who is recovering from a fear of the dark, and Henrietta, her hen, who is recovering from PTSD, go undercover in a luxury game lodge called Karoo Wilderness Reserve. And there they are spying on guests because some rare succulents have been poached. And they are also doing a sting operation for some gangsters that are about to break in with succulent theft. So they're on a mission to save the Fet Plankies. And at the same time, Tannie Maria's on her own mission to working through her own issues around her fear of the dark, around marrying Henk. And I explore quite a lot the theme of connection rather than control. Connection with nature, connection with each other, connection with self, rather than trying to control. And it was very sparked by there's a major succulent poaching problem in the Klein Karoo. And I work closely also with Botanical Society to draw up a nice practical hands-on leaflet, which is at the back of the book, and we'll probably be doing some joint things with them. But although it's a heavy theme, there's also the usual fun, food and entertainment, a lot through Tannie Maria's hen. She really shines. She's got I won't give any spoilers, but it's a very exciting story for the hen.
So, Sally, we always like to ask our guests what they have been reading or watching or listening to lately that's made an impression.
I live more in the future than in the past. So I just want to mention a couple of books I wanted to download. The new Arundhati Roy, I'm really keen to read. I have followed her stuff, haven't been grabbed by all of it, but I'm interested in it as nonfiction. And then there's also another book around tapping, emotional freedom techniques. I read a fair amount of self-helpy stuff, in between a lot of cozy mysteries. I love, and I find some of the older stuff. It's only recently I've read anything written since the 40s. I read all the old Stanley Gardner, and then I found the Amelia Peabody series. I can't remember who wrote them. And then I also like Adele Abbott. These are the cozy murder mysteries. I'll read. So I've kind of got 3 different sets of books that I like to read. There'll be the cozy stuff, which I'll usually read at night and to help me sleep and relax. And then there's some of the literary stuff, which I like, Kingsolver, Roy. And now and again, I'll try some of the award-winning books, and I'll sort of enjoy this dense and interesting sentence, but I just can't get the momentum to keep going. So I've got to have a story that I like as well as beautiful writing, and I like a happy ending because I really live my books, the ones I write, but also the ones I read. Oh, I just finished Dion Meyer's. It's the first hard copy book I've read in quite a while, Leo. And that was great. I did these other books I've read in Afrikaans, so I felt a little bit of a cheat because his Afrikaans writing is more beautiful. But that was very gripping, and that was interesting. It was a little bit disturbing, actually, because I think it stole a whole day, a day and a half, something. It was just so gripping, each chapter. That was fun. And then I do kind of self-help book things, so tuning the human biofield, kind of psychological, spiritual books.
Well, we hope that everybody checks out the latest Tannie Maria mystery published by Penguin Random House. It's called Wild Things Never Die. It deals with themes of botany, poaching, environmentalism. There's so much going on, and it's very much back in that familiar setting that your readers love and cherish and just want to be in. It's so delightful. We know that everyone's going to absolutely love it, and it's always a big event in the publishing world when a new Tannie Maria comes out. So congratulations on that. And thank you so much for your time. This has been delightful. Gail, Sally Andrew has been on our wish list for a long time, hasn't she?
She has, absolutely. I think at the beginning we were probably too scared to ask her.
So it's wonderful that she has a new book out and that she was willing to give us so much of her time. It was delightful talking to her.
I could have spent the day talking to her. She's so full of information. She's so full of knowledge, and she says the most unexpected things.
She does indeed. So what unexpected thing struck you?
So I had not thought that Sally Andrew, of all people, was going to be the person who made me feel better about rejection. Mm-hmm. But I was very struck by the things she said about rejection and the reminder that it's part of the creative process, that every writer goes through it. And I think in particular, I was interested in her idea for every one rejection she received, she made 2 more submissions. Mm-hmm. And even though that makes me feel incredibly tired, it just was a reminder. Rejection is a big part of the writing process. And most writers, except the luckiest of the lucky, go through this in their way to having a big success. This is my time for getting rejected. Sally Andrew had hers. I will be okay.
You will indeed.
What did you get from her?
I was so interested in what she was saying about not being too attached to a plot and how ideas are 10 a penny and that it's really the execution of the idea that matters. Because I think one can look at her career and think, oh, she had such a good idea, a cozy mystery set in the Klein Karoo with this charming main character. Oh, she took the idea and now no one else can do it kind of thing. And that it was just the idea that was great. And yes, the idea was great, but it was her execution of it. It's the way she sat down, came to the page, book after book, and executed it so magnificently. And that was a good reminder for me, because you might think, oh, someone's already done that, or I need a better idea, or I'm busy on this idea, but that idea sounds like such fun, or, being seduced by this whole world of ideas, and that it's actually not the idea. It's the way you execute it. And if an idea is not working, to be willing to throw it away and say, oh, okay, I'm open to new ideas. That was so interesting.
And I think also, just picking up on one of the things you've said, that your idea doesn't have to be magnificently original. You mustn't drop an idea just because you think, oh, well, that's not the most original. Actually, there are no new ideas.
Yes.
Like you and Sally have now said, it's the execution.
Yeah. I found that a very good reminder. So if any of our listeners have read the Tannie Maria series and are absolutely enraptured by them, as I think most of South Africa is, please get in touch. We'd love to hear what you think of the new one, Wild Things Never Die. It's out now by Penguin Random House. We're on all social media across the board. Please get in touch.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.